We're currently moving through a really powerful eclipse window, with the solar eclipse on August 12th, followed by the lunar eclipse on August 28th. In Western astrology, the solar eclipse falls in Leo. This brings themes around identity, confidence, visibility, and stepping into a new version of yourself. But in Vedic astrology, it falls in Cancer, in Ashlesha. I don't know if I said that right, I'm so sorry if I said it wrong, which carries serpent symbolism and themes of shedding, attachment, and releasing what you've outgrown. So this reading is really about what happens in between those two eclipses, because there's definitely room for both Western astrology and Vedic astrology. So what is leaving your life? What is changing? What is developing behind the scenes? And where are you going to be standing by the time this eclipse season is over? Let's get straight into it. Alright, for today's reading we have these three piles, pile 1, pile 2, and pile 3. Take a moment, look at each pile, and choose the one you feel most drawn to. You can pause the video if you need a little more time. If you feel drawn to more than one pile, feel free to watch multiple, as there could be messages in multiple piles that you need to hear. As always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Your timestamps will be in the description below, so once you've chosen your pile, let's get into your reading. Okay, if you picked pile 1, this reading is for you. So our first question is, where are you as you enter eclipse season? Alright, pile 1, we have the Devil, the Lovers, and the Queen of Wands. So immediately, I feel like you're entering this period at a point where you're becoming very aware of something that has had a little too much power over you. The Devil can be attachment, patterns, habits, fear, even something that you've felt almost chained to. And that doesn't necessarily have to be another person. For some of you, this could be a job, a way you've been living, something you've been chasing, a belief about yourself, or even a version of your life that you've convinced yourself you have to stay committed to. And then we have the Lovers directly beside it, which is really interesting because the Lovers isn't only about relationships. At its core, it's also a card of choice and alignment. So I think a lot of you are standing at a point where you're starting to ask, is this actually what I choose? Or is this just what I've become attached to? There's a big difference between the two. And then we end with the Queen of Wands, which makes me feel like this eclipse season is meeting you right at a point where you're starting to reclaim your confidence and your sense of self. The Queen of Wands knows who she is. She doesn't really need permission to take up space, pursue something, create something, change direction, or to be seen. So you may already feel something shifting internally before anything has even changed externally. There's almost this sense of you realizing that you cannot keep making decisions based purely on fear, comfort, attachment, or what other people expect from you. You're being pulled towards whatever feels more authentically yours. And I think that's going to become really important as we move through the rest of this reading, because you're entering these eclipses already standing between what has had a hold on you and who you're becoming when you finally choose yourself. So now we're going to move on to our second question, pile 2. Oh my gosh, the cat just ran into the wall just then. What area of your life is about to change? Okay, we have the Ace of Swords, 3 of Pentacles, and the Chariot. Honestly, pile 1, this feels very connected to your direction in life. For a lot of you, I think this is going to show up through work, study, a project you're building, something you're learning, or even a goal that you've been trying to make real. The Ace of Swords feels like a decision or a breakthrough first. You may suddenly become very clear about what you want to do next, what isn't working anymore, or what direction actually makes sense for you. And with the 3 of Pentacles, there's something here about building. This isn't just an idea floating around in your head. It feels like something that requires effort, skill, planning, collaboration, or actually putting yourself out there and allowing other people to see what you're capable of. Some of you could be stepping into a new work environment, starting a new project, studying something, working with different people, or finally getting serious about something you've wanted to create for a while. And then we have the Chariot. That's movement. That's taking control of the direction you're heading in and actually going somewhere with it. So I actually don't think the biggest change for this pile is necessarily going to be something that just happens to you. I think it's going to come from a moment of clarity where you decide, okay, this is where I'm going now. And once you make that decision, things could start moving quite quickly. For some of you, the Chariot can also literally bring travel, relocation, or a change in your physical environment. But even if that's not literal, there's a strong sense of forward movement here. And considering we just had the Devil, the Lovers, and the Queen of Wands, I think this is starting to make sense, pile 1. You're not only releasing something that has had a hold over you, you're choosing a direction that feels much more like your own. Now we're going to move on to our third question, which is what is being eclipsed out of your life? Okay, so pile 1, we have 6 of Wands, the Star, and the Fool. This is interesting because none of these cards I would normally look at and think this needs to go. So I don't think you're losing success, opportunity, or hope. I think you're losing an old idea of what success was supposed to look like. So the 6 of Wands can be recognition, validation, achievement, being noticed, and even proving yourself. And for some of you, I think you've spent a long time measuring whether you're doing well based on external things. Am I being recognized? Do other people think I'm successful? Have I achieved enough yet? Can I prove that this was worth it? And I feel like this is starting to matter a lot less, because then we have the Star. And the Star can represent this vision that we hold for our future, something we've hoped for or imagined for a really long time. But sometimes we hold on to a dream simply because we've had it for so long. And I wonder whether some of you are realizing that the future you once desperately wanted isn't necessarily the future you want anymore. Maybe you've changed. Maybe you've already achieved part of it and realized it doesn't fulfill you in the way you expected. Or maybe something entirely different is starting to call you. And that's where the Fool comes in, because the Fool is almost completely detached from everybody else's expectations. He's not following the path because it looks impressive or because somebody else told him that's where he should go. He's willing to step into something new simply because he feels pulled towards it. So what I actually think this eclipse is removing is the pressure to keep following an old version of your life just because you once believed that's where you were supposed to end up. And that fits so well with everything we've already seen. The Devil showed us an attachment. The Lovers showed us a choice. The Queen of Wands showed us you coming back into yourself. And now we're seeing that one of the things you're releasing may be the need to prove that the old path was the right one. There's a new chapter trying to open here, and I think part of getting there is allowing yourself to admit that your definition of success may have changed. So now we're going to ask, what are you being asked to shed? Okay, so we have Ace of Pentacles, the Lovers again, and the Ten of Pentacles. So the Lovers coming out for a second time is really important because I think a choice is becoming one of the major themes for you, pile 1. But with the Ace of Pentacles and the Ten of Pentacles surrounding it, this particular choice feels very connected to security. So think money, career, stability, your home, long-term plans, what feels sensible and what feels safe. And I don't think you're being asked to shed stability itself. I think you're being asked to shed the idea that you always have to choose the option that looks the safest on paper. The Ten of Pentacles can represent the life we're told we're supposed to want, the stable career, the predictable path, the long-term plan, the thing that makes sense to everybody else. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with any of that. But with the Lovers sitting right in the middle, I think this eclipse is asking you whether the future you're building is actually aligned with you or whether you've been building it because it feels secure. Because then we have the Ace of Pentacles. And that makes me think there may be another opportunity, another path, or even just another way of creating stability that you haven't fully allowed yourself to consider yet. Something new, something that might start smaller, something that doesn't necessarily come with guarantees, but something that could actually grow into something very substantial. And this fits so closely with the Fool we just saw. There's this repeating message throughout your reading that you may be moving away from an old version of success and towards something that feels much more authentic. And maybe what you're shedding isn't your desire for security. Maybe you're shedding the belief that security can only come from one particular path. The Lovers has now appeared twice. So I really think this eclipse season is putting you at a crossroads, and the question isn't simply which option is safer. It's becoming which future do I actually want to build? Which moves us to our next question, which is what truth is about to become impossible to ignore? So we have the High Priestess, the Six of Wands, and the Page of Pentacles. Honestly, I think some of you already know pile one. The High Priestess is that quiet inner knowing that doesn't necessarily come with proof yet. It's the thing you've been thinking about privately, the direction you've felt pulled towards, the idea that keeps coming back. Maybe you've tried to rationalize it away, maybe you've told yourself you're imagining it, or that you need more evidence before you can trust it. But I think this eclipse season is going to make it increasingly difficult to pretend you don't know what you know. And then we have the Six of Wands coming out for the second time. Earlier when we asked what was being eclipsed out, I felt like the Six of Wands was connected to releasing an old definition of success and the need for external validation. But here, in a completely different position, I think it's showing us something else. There actually is potential for you to be successful in this new direction. There's potential to be recognized. There's potential for something you're doing to gain momentum or for other people to start noticing what you have to offer. The difference is that you're not supposed to pursue it purely for the recognition. You're supposed to pursue it because somewhere underneath everything else, you already know it matters to you. And then we have the Page of Pentacles, which I love here because the page isn't standing there pretending to have everything figured out. He's learning, he's experimenting, he's taking something that exists as an idea or a possibility and asking, okay, how do I actually make this real? For some of you, this could literally be a new job, a course, a qualification, a new business idea, a creative project, a financial opportunity, or a skill that you're beginning to develop. And you might still feel like a beginner. You might look at where you want to be and think, I'm nowhere near ready for that. But I think the truth becoming impossible to ignore is that you don't need to be at the finish line to know you're on the right path. You may already have the intuition. You already have the potential. What you're being asked to do now is to start giving it something tangible to grow from. And again, this entire pile keeps coming back to the same thing. There's another direction opening for you. I think you've known that for longer than you've admitted. And now the cards are almost saying, stop waiting for somebody else to confirm what you already know. So our next question from that is, what unexpected development changes things? Okay, so we have the King of Cups, the Knight of Pentacles, and the Wheel of Fortune. I actually don't think this is going to look dramatic when it first appears. The King of Cups and the Knight of Pentacles are both very controlled energies, pile one. They're not rushing in, they're not chaotic, they're not giving me this sense of something blowing your life apart overnight. If anything, this could begin as something quite subtle. For some of you, this could be a person who becomes important to this next chapter. Someone emotionally mature, supportive, experienced, or simply somebody who sees what you're trying to do and helps you approach it in a more grounded way. That could absolutely be romantic for some of you, but considering everything else in this pile, I would also look at a mentor, employer, collaborator, a teacher, a client, a friend, or even somebody who offers useful guidance or an opportunity. And the Knight of Pentacles here tells me whatever comes from this isn't necessarily instant. It develops steadily. There may be an offer, a practical next step, a new responsibility, or something that initially seems quite ordinary. But then we have the Wheel of Fortune, and that's where I think you're going to look back and realize that this was actually a turning point. Something small sets a much bigger sequence of events into motion. It could be meeting the right person, accepting an opportunity, starting something you're not completely sure about yet, or simply deciding to keep showing up for something consistently. And suddenly, the direction of your life begins changing. The wheel can also bring timing into this. Something that may have felt delayed or stagnant starts moving because the circumstances around you finally shift. So I really think the unexpected part isn't necessarily that something huge drops into your lap. It's that something which initially looks quite modest ends up changing your trajectory far more than you realize at the time. And with the Knight of Pentacles here, I would really pay attention to the opportunities that don't look flashy, because the thing that changes everything for you may be the thing that simply feels solid enough to build on. Now our next question is, what changes in your physical reality? Okay, so we have Strength, Knight of Cups, and the King of Wands. This feels like you becoming much more active in your own life. Strength is confidence, courage, self-control, learning how to work with your fears instead of letting them control you. So I think one of the first things that changes externally is that you start behaving differently. You may become more willing to speak up, pursue something, put yourself forward, take a risk, apply for something, create something, or even finally act on an idea you've been sitting on. And then we have the Knight of Cups. So for some of you, yes, this could absolutely be an invitation, an offer, a message, or somebody approaching you with something. But because this pile has been so strongly focused on life direction, I don't want to automatically turn this into romance. The Knight of Cups can also be you following something because it genuinely inspires you. A creative opportunity, a project, something you've dreamed about doing, something that feels emotionally meaningful rather than purely practical. And then we come to the King of Wands. This is somebody who takes the idea and actually does something with it. He has vision, confidence, leadership, ambition. So I think the physical change here is that you stop being passive about the life you want. You start taking up more space in it. For some of you, this could show up as taking on more responsibility, becoming more visible in your work, leading something, launching something, starting your own project, or even simply becoming much more decisive about where you're going next. And I also think other people may start responding differently to you because of that. There's a really big shift here from the energy we saw at the beginning with the Devil, where something had a hold over you, into this King of Wands energy where you're the one directing things. So by the time we get further into eclipse season, pile one, I think something very tangible changes because you're no longer waiting to feel completely fearless before you move. You're moving anyway. And once you do, I think opportunities start meeting you halfway. So now we're going to look at what happens in love and relationships between the eclipses. Okay, pile one, we have the Sun, 5 of Swords, and the 10 of Pentacles. I think something becomes very clear here. The sun illuminates, it brings things out into the open. So if there has been confusion around a relationship, mixed signals, something left unsaid, or even uncertainty about what somebody actually wants, I don't think it's going to be as easy to avoid that anymore. But then we have the 5 of Swords. So the clarity might not arrive through the easiest conversation, pile one. There could be tension, a disagreement, somebody's pride getting involved, or a moment where you realize that a dynamic has become more about winning, proving a point, or protecting yourself than actually understanding each other. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing here, because we finish with the Ten of Pentacles. I think the bigger question becomes, can this actually support the kind of relationship or future I want? For those of you already in a relationship, something may need to be addressed rather than brushed aside. And if the relationship is solid, this could actually help you build something stronger, because you're being forced to look honestly at the way you communicate, the future you're creating together, and whether you're genuinely on the same page. For those of you who are single, I think this could be much more about your standards becoming clearer. You may suddenly have very little patience for connections that are confusing, competitive, inconsistent, or constantly leave you questioning where you stand. The Ten of Pentacles says you're looking much further ahead now. You're not only asking, do I like this person? You're asking, could I actually build something with them? And I think that's the relationship shift for this pile. The eclipse period may expose the difference between a connection that simply gets your attention and one that actually has the stability to become part of your life long term. Now we're going to look at what is developing behind the scenes that you can't see yet. Okay, pile 1, we have Ace of Pentacles, the Star, and Page of Wands. Pile 1, the repeats in this reading are getting really loud because we've already seen both the Ace of Pentacles and the Star, and now they're coming back together in the position of something developing that you don't fully see yet. So I really do think there's a new opportunity beginning to form around you. The Ace of Pentacles can be something tangible entering your life. A new job, a financial opportunity, a project, a new path, a chance to build something, or even the beginning of a completely different lifestyle. And because it's an ace, this may still be very small right now. It might not look important yet. You may not even know it's there. But then we have the Star. And earlier, I felt like the Star was showing you releasing an old version of your future. So I find it really interesting that it's now coming back in this position. Maybe because you're not losing the dream. Maybe the dream is changing shape. There could be something developing behind the scenes that's actually much more aligned with the person you're becoming, rather than the person you thought you had to be. And then we have the Page of Wands. This feels new, exciting, and exploratory. It's something that makes you curious again, something you want to try, something that gives you that feeling of, what if I actually went for this? And I don't think you're supposed to have the entire plan yet. The Page of Wands doesn't need to know exactly where something will lead before taking the first step. So whatever is developing behind the scenes may enter your life initially as an idea, an invitation, a conversation, a new interest, or even a small opportunity that suddenly gives you a completely different direction to explore. With the Ace of Pentacles here, I would take it seriously, pile 1, because this doesn't feel like something that just inspires you for 5 minutes and disappears. It feels like something that has the potential to become real. So even though you can't see the full picture yet, I think there's already a new path beginning to open. And interestingly, it looks a lot like the future this entire reading has been quietly pointing you towards. So now we're going to look at what reaches a turning point at August 28th lunar eclipse. Okay, so we have Strength again, 6 of Pentacles, and the 10 of Cups. And I really like this because Strength has already appeared earlier in your reading. So confidence, courage, and trusting yourself clearly aren't just temporary themes for you during this eclipse season. They're becoming part of the actual outcome. I think by the time you reach the lunar eclipse, you're going to be much more certain about what you will and will not give your energy to. And the 6 of Pentacles is really important here because it brings in balance and mutual energy. You may start noticing very clearly where effort is being returned and where it isn't. That could be in work, friendships, family, relationships, even the way you're investing your time into a goal. And I think something reaches a point where you're no longer willing to constantly pour into situations that give very little back. You're becoming much more selective with your energy. And then we end with the 10 of Cups, which is such a beautiful card to have at a culmination point. This feels like moving towards something that actually feels emotionally right for you. Not just impressive, not just secure, not just something that looks good from the outside, something that genuinely feels fulfilling. For some of you, this could absolutely involve relationships, family, or your home life becoming more harmonious. For others, I think it's bigger than that. It's almost like you finally begin to understand what your version of a happy life actually looks like. And that feels really significant considering how this pile began. We started with the Devil and this sense of being attached to something, and then the Lovers asking you to choose. And throughout the reading, we've watched you slowly move towards a life that feels more like your own. So by the Lunar Eclipse, I think the turning point is this. You stop asking whether something is good enough to hold on to, and you start asking whether it actually gives something back to you. And whatever does feel mutual, supportive, and genuinely fulfilling is what you're going to want to build on from here. So our final question before we dive into oracle cards: where do you stand when eclipse season is over? Okay, so we have the Magician, the Nine of Cups, and the Knight of Cups. This feels like such a different energy from where we started. The Magician is somebody who realizes, I actually have more power here than I thought. You have the tools, you have options, you can make a decision and actually do something with it. And that feels really important because this pile began with the Devil, where something felt like it had a hold over you. And by the end of the reading, we have the Magician. So there's a huge shift from feeling controlled by a situation, an attachment, or an old pattern, and into becoming much more conscious of the role you have in creating what happens next. And then we have the Nine of Cups. And I think this is where you start getting much clearer about what you actually want. Not what looks impressive, not what makes everybody else happy, not what you think you're supposed to want, what genuinely feels fulfilling to you. There could absolutely be something you're wishing for that starts coming closer during this eclipse season, especially because we've had so many cards of opportunity and forward movement throughout this pile. But I think the Nine of Cups is also showing an internal change. You become much less willing to abandon your own desires just to stay attached to something familiar. And then we finish with the Knight of Cups. So you're not only identifying what you want, you're moving towards it. For some of you, this could literally be an offer, an invitation, a creative opportunity, or even a romantic development. But overall, I think the Knight of Cups is showing you following something because it feels meaningful. You're allowing yourself to be led by inspiration again. You're allowing yourself to want something, and you're actually doing something about it. So when this eclipse season is over, I don't think everything in your life is suddenly finished or perfectly figured out, but I do think you're standing in a completely different relationship with your own future. You know what you want more clearly, you trust yourself more, and instead of waiting for life to decide for you, you're starting to actively participate in what comes next. And for pile one, I think that's really the entire story of these eclipses. You begin by asking, what am I still attached to? And you end by asking, what do I actually want to create now? So now we're going to dive into the oracle cards and have a little look at what does your higher self want you to trust while this unfolds. Okay, so your oracle card that came out is the Sun. This card talks about manifestation, personal power, 1111 energy, and its message is essentially be patient, it will come. You've done well, now it's time to trust your efforts. And honestly, I don't think we could have ended this pile with a better message, because so much of your reading has been about making a choice, trusting a new direction, and letting go of the need to know exactly how everything is going to work out before you take the next step. You've had the Star twice. You've had the Ace of Pentacles twice. You've had the Six of Wands twice. You've seen the Magician, the Nine of Cups, the Ten of Cups. There's been so much throughout this reading suggesting that something you genuinely want is beginning to take shape. And I think your biggest challenge may be trusting it while it's still becoming visible. And that's what the Sun is asking you to do. You've already planted something. You've already put effort into something. You've already started changing internally, even if your physical reality hasn't completely caught up with that yet. So maybe you don't need to push quite so hard right now. Maybe you don't need another sign. Maybe you don't need to keep questioning whether you're on the right path. Your message is simply to keep showing up, keep choosing what feels aligned with you, and allow what you've been building to actually have time to grow. Because this doesn't feel like an eclipse season where you're losing everything. It feels like the one where you're clearing enough space for something you've been trying to create to finally reach you. And pile 1, I'm going to leave your reading there. Let me know in the comments below if it resonated, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, if you picked pile 2, this reading is for you, and we're going to start with, where are you as you enter eclipse season? Okay, pile 2, we have the Queen of Swords, Nine of Swords, and the Six of Swords. So immediately, there's so much mental energy here. All 3 of your cards are swords. So I think a lot of you are entering this eclipse period after a time of overthinking, worrying, analysing something to death, or simply feeling mentally exhausted by a situation. The Nine of Swords here can especially be those thoughts that get louder when everything goes quiet. Replaying conversations, thinking about everything that could go wrong, trying to work out what somebody meant, and trying to predict an outcome before it happens. Or even feeling like you've been carrying something in your head for much longer than you want to admit. But what's interesting is that we have the Queen of Swords here and the Six of Swords after it. So I don't actually think you're entering eclipse season completely lost inside that energy anymore. The Queen of Swords feels like you're starting to see something more clearly. You may be becoming less emotional about a situation, setting stronger boundaries, or reaching a point where you're saying, I cannot keep doing this to myself. There's a very different energy between being trapped in your thoughts and being able to observe them clearly. And I think that's where you're moving. Then we have the Six of Swords, which is literally a card of transition, moving away from something difficult, leaving behind a mentally or emotionally turbulent period. You may not feel completely free of it yet because the Six of Swords is usually the journey rather than the destination, but you are moving, and I think that's the important part. So pile 2, you're entering this eclipse season at a point where something that has taken up a huge amount of mental space may finally be losing its grip on you. You're starting to think more clearly. You're becoming more sensitive about what deserves your energy. And I think these eclipses may help you put even more distance between yourself and whatever has been keeping your mind in a constant state of tension. I also have to say, the minute I started filming this, I'm feeling a little bit dizzy. So some of you might even physically be having those sort of symptoms as well. Now we're going to move on to the second question, which is what area of your life is about to change. So we have the 10 of Wands, the 3 of Wands, and the King of Wands. Every single card here is a Wands. I feel like I'm about to lose my mind. That's wild. Pile 2, this feels very strongly connected to your ambition, your work, your responsibilities, your creative life, or something you've been putting a huge amount of energy into. With the 10 of Wands coming out first, I think some of you have been carrying far too much. You may have taken on more responsibility than you realistically have the capacity for. Been trying to do everything yourself, or reaching a point where something you once felt passionate about has started feeling heavy. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're supposed to walk away from it, because the 3 of Wands here is expansion. It's looking beyond where you currently are and asking what else is possible from here. So I think the change may actually involve finding a way to grow beyond the situation you've been stuck in, rather than continuing to carry it in exactly the same way. This could be expanding a business, changing jobs, stepping into a different role, taking something you've been creating more seriously, working with a bigger audience, traveling, relocating, or simply starting to think much further ahead than you have been. And then we have the King of Wands, which makes this feel like you're being pushed into a much more powerful position within this area of your life. The King of Wands doesn't just have ideas. He leads, he makes decisions, he has a vision and takes responsibility for bringing it into reality. So for some of you, this could literally be stepping into leadership, becoming more visible, running something yourself, or finally treating something you've been doing almost casually as something that could become much bigger. And I really like the progression here. We go from the 10 of Wands, where your energy is being consumed by everything you're carrying, to the 3 of Wands, where you're looking outward and seeing another possibility, to the King of Wands, where you're actually directing that energy rather than just being overwhelmed by it. So the area of life changing for you feels very connected to how you use your energy and what you're trying to build with it. You're not supposed to keep working harder and harder just to maintain where you already are. I think you're being asked to work differently, think bigger, and become much more intentional about where all of that effort is actually taking you. Now, pile 2, we are going to move on to what is being eclipsed out of your life. And let's see if all of the same suite comes out. Okay, so we have the Queen of Wands, Knight of Swords, and the 3 of Wands. Finally, a bit of variety. And I think this is really interesting because none of these cards are inherently negative. But together, I feel like they're describing a version of you that has been constantly switched on, always thinking about the next move, always pushing forward, always trying to stay confident, productive, capable, or one step ahead. The Queen of Wands can be incredibly self-assured and driven, but I think in this position, she may be showing the pressure you've put on yourself to always look like you have everything under control, to be the strong one, to be the motivated one, to keep showing up even when you're exhausted. And the Knight of Swords adds this sense of urgency. Rushing, reacting, trying to solve everything immediately, feeling like if you don't move quickly enough, you'll miss something. And considering your first 3 cards were all swords, I think this pile may have been living in a state of mental and energetic overdrive for a while. Then we have the 3 of Wands repeating. Earlier I read this as an expansion and looking toward what's next. And I still think that's part of your future, pile 2. But here, I think what you're releasing is the belief that you always have to be looking ahead, always chasing the next milestone, always asking, what comes after this? You're allowed to build something without constantly measuring how far you still have to go. So I don't think this eclipse is taking away your ambition. I think it's changing your relationship with it. You're still expanding, you're still moving towards something bigger, but you may be leaving behind the version of yourself that believed progress only counted if you were constantly pushing for more. And honestly, I think that's going to be important for this pile, because there's a difference between being driven and never allowing yourself to stop. You're going to burn yourself out, pile 2, if you haven't already. So our next question is, what are you being asked to shed? Alright, and we have Temperance, 5 of Cups, Knight of Wands. I think this is about emotional regulation more than anything else. Temperance is balance, patience, moderation, learning how to hold 2 different truths at the same time without immediately reacting to either one. But then we have the 5 of Cups, which can be disappointment, regret, grief, or focusing on what wasn't working out the way you hoped. And then with the Knight of Wands, this is very fast, restless energy. So I wonder if some of you have been stuck in a pattern where something disappoints you, you sit with it for a while, and then eventually you get frustrated and you feel like you need to do something immediately just to change the feeling. You might throw yourself into something new, make a sudden decision, change direction quickly, distract yourself, or convince yourself that you need to keep moving because sitting still means actually feeling what happened. It looks like this eclipse season is asking you to shed that pattern, not your passion and not your ability to move forward, but the need to react every time something feels uncomfortable. Temperance is asking you to slow that process down. Give yourself enough space to work out whether you genuinely want to change direction or whether you're simply trying to escape disappointment. And I think that matters a lot for this pile because we've already seen how much energy you've been carrying. The 10 of Wands, all of those swords at the beginning, the Knight of Swords, this constant sense of movement, pressure, thinking, doing. So maybe the thing you're shedding is the belief that every uncomfortable feeling requires an immediate response. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is actually stay still long enough to understand what the feeling is trying to tell you. And once you do that, pile 2, I think the Knight of Wands becomes much healthier. Instead of running from something, you're moving towards something because you genuinely want it. So your message here is really about learning the difference between impulse and inspiration. One is trying to get you away from discomfort, and the other is actually trying to lead you somewhere. So now we're going to look at what truth is about to become impossible for you to ignore. Okay, and we have 7 of Cups, the Tower, and the Page of Cups. This feels like confusion breaking very quickly. So the 7 of Cups can be having too many possibilities in front of you, pile 2, not knowing which direction is real, imagining different outcomes, or even keeping yourself in uncertainty because choosing one thing means letting the others go. And then we have the Tower. So I don't think the state of confusion is going to be able to continue for much longer. Something may happen that makes one option, one situation, or one truth suddenly much clearer, and it might not arrive in the neatest way. The Tower can be a realization, a conversation, information coming out, plans changing, or something simply no longer being able to hold itself together in the way it has been. But I don't necessarily think this is negative, because then we have the Page of Cups, and after all of that confusion and disruption, we land somewhere much softer. The Page of Cups feels honest, simple, emotionally genuine. So I think the truth becoming impossible to ignore may actually be much less complicated than you've made it in your head. You may realize what you genuinely feel, what you genuinely want, what excites you, what you're curious about, or what still matters to you once all of the noise falls away. And considering how this pile started with the Queen of Swords, 9 of Swords, and 6 of Swords, I think this is important. You've been trying to think your way through something, trying to analyze it, trying to predict every possible outcome, but the Tower may remove the need to keep doing that. Something becomes obvious. And once it does, I think the Page of Cups asks you to respond from a much more honest place, not from fear, not from pressure, not from what looks smartest, but from what actually feels true. So the truth you may not be able to ignore anymore is that underneath all of the possibilities, all of the overthinking, and all of the uncertainty, you probably already know which possibility your heart keeps returning to. So now we're looking at what unexpected development changes things. We have the 8 of Wands, the Empress, and the King of Pentacles. This feels like movement, like fast movement. The 8 of Wands can be news coming in, communication, an opportunity, suddenly gaining momentum, or something that has felt stagnant finally starting to move. And I think the unexpected part may be just how quickly something develops once it begins. Because we have the Empress. The Empress grows things. She takes something that has potential and nurtures it until it becomes something tangible. So this could be an idea, a creative project, a business, a job opportunity, even something connected to your home or finances that suddenly starts expanding much more than you expected. And then we finish with the King of Pentacles. So whatever begins moving here doesn't feel temporary. there's a real potential for stability. For some of you, this could involve somebody entering the situation who is established, financially secure, experienced, or able to offer practical support. That could be an employer, like mentor, client, a collaborator, or somebody who helps you turn an idea into something much more concrete. But I also think this could be you stepping into that King of Pentacles energy yourself, taking something you've been passionate about and finally treating it like something that can actually support you. And considering how much Wands energy we've already had in this pile, I really like seeing the King of Pentacles here because your ambition isn't disappearing, it's becoming grounded. Something that previously existed as excitement, potential, or a future plan may suddenly start producing real results. So I think the unexpected development is that something moves quickly enough to surprise you, but instead of burning out just as quickly, it actually has the potential to grow into something stable and sustainable. So now we're going to look at what changes in your physical reality. Okay, so we have the Eight of Swords, the Knight of Swords, and the Three of Swords, which is really interesting because you actually entered this reading with 3 swords as well. So whatever has been taking up all of this mental space doesn't look like it's going to remain purely internal. Something actually happens that forces movement. The Eight of Swords can be feeling trapped, restricted, or believing that you don't have many options. And I think some of you may have been staying in a situation because you couldn't see a clean way out of it. That could be work, a friendship, a relationship, a living situation, a commitment, even just a pattern that you've felt stuck inside. But then we have the Knight of Swords, and the Knight of Swords does not stay stuck. There could be a very direct conversation, a sudden decision, information coming in, or a moment where somebody finally says what needs to be said. And honestly, it may happen quite quickly. Then we move to the Three of Swords. So I don't necessarily think the immediate change feels comfortable, pile 2. Something may disappoint you. There may be a separation, a rejection, a difficult truth, or simply the realization that something cannot continue in the same way anymore. But I want to be careful here because the Three of Swords does not automatically mean romantic heartbreak. Especially in this pile, this could just as easily be leaving a job that has exhausted you, distancing yourself from somebody, abandoning a plan you invested a lot into, or finally accepting that one particular option isn't going to work. And considering we just have the Seven of Cups and the Tower, I almost feel like this is the physical consequence of that truth becoming clear. Something that has kept you uncertain gets decided. Maybe not in exactly the way you expected, maybe not without some disappointment, but it does free you from the Eight of Swords. And that's what stands out to me, because sometimes clarity hurts before it liberates you. So the physical change here may be an ending, a conversation, or a very decisive shift that initially feels uncomfortable, but it also means you're no longer sitting there wondering what happens next. The situation finally moves. So now we're going to have a little look at what happens in love and relationships between the eclipses. Okay, this actually looks much more grounded than some of the energy we've had in the rest of this pile. So we have the Queen of Pentacles, Page of Swords, and Six of Pentacles. With the Queen of Pentacles, she's very secure in herself. She knows what she brings to the table. She's nurturing, supportive, and generous, but she's also not going to endlessly pour into something that isn't giving anything back. And then we have the Page of Swords. So I do think there could be communication here, curiosity, somebody watching from a distance, or simply a period where you're paying much closer attention to somebody's behavior, not just what they say, what they actually do. For some of you, this could literally be somebody checking in, messaging, watching your social media, or trying to understand where they stand with you. But I also think this page can be you becoming much more observant. You're noticing inconsistencies. You're noticing effort. You're noticing who reaches out first. Noticing whether somebody is actually interested in knowing you or whether you're doing all of the emotional labor. And then we finish with the Six of Pentacles. So mutual energy feels like the main theme. Who is giving? Who is receiving? Is the effort balanced? Does this connection actually feel mutual? For those of you in relationships, this could be a period where you start having more practical conversations about effort, responsibilities, money, time, or what each of you needs from the relationship. For those of you who are single, I think your standards around mutual energy may become much stronger. You're less interested in chasing mixed signals and much more interested in somebody who actually meets you halfway. And after everything we've seen in this pile about exhaustion and carrying too much, I think that makes perfect sense. You're really learning that relationships should not become another place where you have to do all of the work. So between these eclipses, I think love becomes less about intensity and more about asking, is this connection actually balanced enough to build on? So now we're going to look at what is developing behind the scenes that you don't see yet. So we have the Three of Swords, the Five of Cups, and the Nine of Swords. Pile 2, these cards are definitely heavier, but I don't actually feel like this is saying something terrible is secretly waiting to happen, because we've already seen both the Three of Swords and the Nine of Swords elsewhere in your reading. I think this is showing us that something you've been carrying emotionally is already working its way towards the surface. The Three of Swords can be disappointment, grief, separation, or simply a truth that hurts, while the Five of Cups is mourning what didn't work out the way you hoped. And the Nine of Swords is that mental replaying of everything that happened. So behind the scenes, I think there's a process of emotional closure happening. You may not even realize how much something has affected you because you've been so focused on moving forwards, staying productive, or figuring out what comes next. But part of this eclipse season may involve finally acknowledging that something did disappoint you. Something did hurt. Something didn't become what you thought it would. And I actually think admitting that is what helps you move on, because we've already seen the Six of Swords at the very beginning of your reading. You're moving away from this, but sometimes we can't completely leave something behind until we stop pretending it didn't matter. So what is developing behind the scenes may simply be the final emotional processing of a chapter that has already started ending. And once that grief, regret, or disappointment has had somewhere to go, I think you're going to have much more space for all of the new growth we've already seen coming into this pile. So this doesn't feel like pain arriving. It feels much more like pain finally leaving. Now we're going to have a little look at what reaches a turning point at the August 28th lunar eclipse. Okay, so we have the Ace of Cups, the Empress again, and the Ace of Pentacles. Pile 2, this is such a different energy from where your reading began. And we have two aces here. So whatever has been closing out, whatever you've been processing, whatever has been taking up all of that mental and emotional space, I really think this lunar eclipse creates room for something completely new. The Ace of Cups is emotional renewal. It can be a new relationship, a new friendship, renewed creativity, healing, inspiration, or simply feeling emotionally open again after a period where you've been exhausted or disappointed. And then the Empress comes back. We already saw her earlier when we asked what unexpected development changes things, so I really don't think her returning here is accidental. The Empress is growth. Something is being nurtured. Something is becoming more abundant. And I feel like by the lunar eclipse, you're beginning to see evidence that all of this clearing wasn't happening for nothing. Something else needed room to grow. And then we have the Ace of Pentacles. So this isn't only an emotional fresh start. There is something tangible attached to it. A new opportunity, a new source of income, a job, a project, a home or lifestyle change, something you can actually build on. For some of you, the Ace of Cups and Ace of Pentacles together could even represent two separate beginnings happening around the same time. One affecting your emotional life and another affecting your physical or financial reality. But either way, I think the turning point is very clear. Earlier in this reading, we had the Three of Swords, the Five of Cups, and the Nine of Swords, all showing us something being emotionally processed and released. And now at the lunar eclipse, we have two aces and the Empress. So I think this is where the energy changes from grieving what didn't happen into becoming available for what can happen next. And whatever begins here looks like it has real potential, not just something that feels good temporarily, something that can actually grow. So for our final tarot question, we're going to ask, where do you stand when eclipse season is over? Okay, so we have the Knight of Cups, the Six of Cups, and the Ace of Swords. Honestly, this feels like such a gentle ending after how intense parts of this pile has been. The Knight of Cups feels like your heart opening again. You may feel more inspired, more emotionally available, more willing to pursue something that genuinely matters to you. For some of you, yes, this could absolutely be a person coming forward, an invitation, an offer, or some kind of emotional development. But I think this is bigger than romance. The Knight of Cups can also be you reconnecting with something that makes you feel like yourself again. Something creative, something meaningful, something you actually want, rather than something you feel obligated to keep doing. Then we have the Six of Cups, and I think this is where the past becomes important. Not necessarily because you're going backwards, but because you may finally understand something about where you've come from. You could reconnect with an old dream, an old part of yourself, a person from your past, or simply a version of you that existed before everything became so heavy. And considering how much disappointment and anxiety we've had in this pile, I think this card can also be about making peace with something that happened. You're not necessarily forgetting it. You're just not carrying it in the same way anymore. And then we finish with the Ace of Swords. Clarity, a breakthrough, a decision. So by the end of eclipse season, I think your biggest shift is that you finally understand what comes next. You may still be at the beginning of this new chapter, but you're no longer sitting in the same confusion we saw earlier with the Seven of Cups and the Nine of Swords. Something has become clear. You know what you're moving towards, you know what you're leaving behind, and emotionally, you feel much more ready to actually follow that direction. So pile 2, you enter eclipse season with your mind completely overloaded, and you leave it with a much clearer head, a softer heart, and a much stronger sense of where you want to go next. Now we're going to turn to the oracle, and we're going to ask, what does your higher self want you to trust while this unfolds? Okay, so pile 2, you actually got 2 oracle cards come out. So the first is Friends Forever, grow together individually. And I really like this because so much of your reading has been about releasing pressure, changing direction, and becoming much more selective about where your energy goes. This card feels like a reminder that growth doesn't always mean leaving everybody behind. Some relationships are capable of changing with you. You can become different people, pursue different things, need different amounts of space, and still genuinely support one another. And considering we had the Six of Pentacles in your relationship reading, I think this is also emphasizing mutual energy. Pay attention to the people who allow you to grow without making you feel guilty for changing. Those are the connections worth nurturing. And then you also have Unseen. Trust your growing potential, which honestly feels like the perfect message for this pile, because we saw the Empress twice. We saw the Ace of Cups, the Ace of Pentacles, the King of Pentacles. There's so much growth in your reading, but I don't think all of it is visible yet. Some of what you're building is still underneath the surface. So if you feel like you're putting in effort and you're not seeing the results quickly enough, this card basically is saying, don't assume nothing is happening just because you can't see it yet. Something is taking root. You've spent a lot of this reading moving out of anxiety, disappointment, and mental exhaustion. And I think your higher self wants you to trust that the space you're creating is not going to remain empty. You're growing into something new, and some of the people around you may be growing alongside you. You don't need to know exactly what everything becomes yet. Just trust that there is more developing here than you can currently see. Pile 2, that's where I'm going to leave you a reading. I hope it resonated. Let me know in the comments below if it did, and I will see you in the next video. Alright, and finally, if you picked pile 3, this reading is for you. So we're going to start with, where are you as you enter eclipse season? I also just want to say, pile 3, these cards are super glossy. So if I hold them directly to the camera, you can see the screen of the camera, which to me annoys me. So I'll be holding them off to the side. So if you're wondering why I'm holding them off to the side, that is why. Okay, pile 3. So we have the 6 of Cups, the King of Wands, and the 2 of Pentacles. Immediately, I feel like you're trying to balance 2 different versions of your life right now. So the 6 of Cups brings in the past, something familiar, something you've known for a long time. For some of you, this could be an old dream, an old relationship, a familiar environment, a way of living, or even a version of yourself that you still feel emotionally connected to. And then right beside it, we have the King of Wands, which is such a different energy. The King of Wands is ambitious, future-focused, confident, and willing to take the lead. So I think part of you already knows there's something bigger you want to move towards. You may have a new vision of your life, a goal you're becoming much more serious about, or simply this growing feeling that you're capable of more than what you've been allowing yourself to pursue. But then we have the 2 of Pentacles, and that's where I think the tension is. You're juggling, trying to keep everything moving, trying to honor what you've already built, while also making room for whatever is trying to come next. Some of you may literally be balancing work, family, money, responsibilities, or 2 different opportunities. But for others, I think this is more internal. You're asking yourself, can I move forward without completely letting go of who I used to be? And I think that's where you're entering eclipse season. You're not necessarily ready to throw the past away, but you're also becoming increasingly aware that you can't keep giving equal energy to everything forever. At some point, something is going to need to take priority. And with the King of Wands sitting upright in the middle of this spread, I have a feeling this eclipse season may push you towards the version of your life that requires you to be a little bolder, a little more decisive, and much more willing to take the lead in your own direction. Now we're going to move on to question 2, which is, what area of your life is about to change? Okay, so we have the Ace of Wands, the 3 of Cups, and the Knight of Pentacles. This feels like something new beginning around your work, creativity, social world, or a project that you're becoming much more serious about. The Ace of Wands is that initial spark, a new idea, a new opportunity, something that suddenly makes you feel excited again or gives you a reason to want to move. For some of you, this could be a creative project, a business idea, a new job, a new hobby, or simply something you feel genuinely inspired to pursue. But then we have the 3 of Cups, so I don't think this develops completely in isolation. Other people feel important here. This could involve meeting new people, working with a team, collaborating with somebody, becoming part of a different community, or even simply having more support around you than you've had before. And then we finish with the Knight of Pentacles, which tells me this isn't just a burst of excitement that disappears a week later. Something about this has the potential to become consistent, stable, something you build over time. So I think the area of your life changing is really connected to the way you're turning inspiration into something tangible. You may start with an idea or an opportunity that feels exciting, but then you actually commit to it. You create a routine around it. You learn the skill, you keep showing up. And eventually it starts becoming part of your real life rather than something you only think about doing. And considering we just saw the 2 of Pentacles in your opening, I think this may also explain why you've been juggling so much. They could already be something new trying to enter your life, and you're working out how to make room for it. So pile 3, the change feels like a new spark becoming something much more real, with other people potentially playing an important role in helping it grow. So now we're going to look at what is being eclipsed out of your life. Okay, so we have the Page of Pentacles, the Six of Wands, and Death. This feels like the end of a chapter where you've been constantly trying to prove that something has potential. The Page of Pentacles is still learning, still building, still figuring things out. And there's nothing wrong with being a beginner, but I think some of you have been sitting in that energy for longer than you're meant to. You may have been telling yourself that you're not ready yet, that you may need more experience, more knowledge, more validation, more proof that what you're doing is actually going somewhere. And then we have the Six of Wands, which brings in recognition and success. So I wonder if part of what you're releasing is the need for other people to confirm that you're doing well before you fully believe in yourself. Maybe you've been measuring your progress through attention, praise, numbers, approval, or whether other people can see the value in what you're creating. And then death comes in and says that version of the journey is ending. This doesn't feel like losing an opportunity. It feels like outgrowing the version of yourself who is still waiting to be told that you're allowed to take yourself seriously. Something about your identity is changing. You're moving out of the stage of experimenting and asking, can I really do this? And into something much more committed. So what is being eclipsed out feels like the beginner version of you and the need to keep proving that you're worthy of the next level. You're not supposed to stay in preparation forever. At some point, you have to let the old version of you end so the person who actually does the thing can take over. So now we're going to look at what are you being asked to shed. Okay, so we have the Six of Pentacles, Death again, and the Knight of Cups. Pile 3. Death has now come out twice in a row. So I really don't think we can ignore how significant this transition is for you. Something is ending. But I don't necessarily mean a dramatic external ending. I think this is about the way you give your energy to things. The Six of Pentacles is exchange, it's mutual energy, giving and receiving. And in this position, I feel like you're being asked to look very honestly at where you've been giving more than you're getting back. That could be in relationships, friendships, work, a creative project, even something you've been emotionally invested in because you wanted so badly for it to become something more. And then death comes in again. So whatever has been draining you, whatever you've been trying to keep alive through effort alone, I think this eclipse season is asking you to stop forcing it. You don't have to keep pouring energy into something just because you've already invested a lot into it. Then we have the Knight of Cups, which makes me think this is also about letting go of an idealized version of something. Maybe you've been attached to what something could become. Maybe you've been following the feeling, the dream, the potential, rather than looking at what is actually being returned to you in reality. And I don't think the Knight of Cups is telling you to become more cynical or stop following your heart. I think it's asking you to become more discerning about where your heart goes, because there is a difference between pursuing something meaningful and continually romanticizing something that isn't meeting you halfway. So what you're being asked to shed is the belief that if you just love something enough, work hard enough, give enough, or wait long enough, it will eventually become what you hoped it would be. Death is saying you're allowed to let something change form. You're allowed to release it, and you're allowed to redirect that energy towards something that actually has the capacity to grow with you. And considering death has now appeared twice, I think that release is going to be one of the biggest turning points of this entire pile. So now we're going to look at what truth is about to become impossible to ignore. Okay, I think this is about getting very honest with yourself about what you want. So the Nine of Cups is desire. It's the thing you wish for, the thing you imagine would make you happy. And I don't think the cards are saying that desire is wrong. But then we have the Knight of Wands and the Devil, and that changes the tone quite a bit. because the Knight of Wands can chase. He can become very fixated on the next thing, the next thrill, the next opportunity, the next person, the next goal. And the Devil can show us where desire becomes attachment, where something stops being, I really want this, and starts becoming, I need this to happen in order to feel okay. So the truth you may not be able to ignore anymore is that there is something you've been giving far too much power to. For some of you, that could absolutely be a person or a relationship, but for others, this could be success, money, recognition, a specific career outcome, a lifestyle, or even the idea that your life has to unfold in one particular way. And considering we've now had death twice, I think you're being asked to separate the desire itself from the attachment you've built around it. You can still want something, you can still pursue something, but you may have to stop allowing the outcome to control your emotional state. Because the Knight of Wands is much healthier when he's moving from passion rather than desperation. The Nine of Cups is much healthier when you can enjoy what you already have while still wanting more. So I think the truth becoming impossible to ignore is this. There's something you genuinely want, but the way you've been holding on to it may be part of what needs to change. You don't necessarily have to let go of the dream. You just may have to let go of the grip. So now we're going to ask, what unexpected development changes things? Okay, so we have the 9 of Pentacles, 6 of Swords, and 10 of Pentacles. This feels like a move into much more stability. The 9 of Pentacles is independence, self-sufficiency, enjoying what you've built, and feeling secure in your own space. So for some of you, there could be an unexpected development that makes you realize you're actually much more capable of standing on your own than you thought. This could be financial, it could be career related, it could involve your home, living situation, or simply becoming less dependent on somebody else's approval, support, or decisions. Then we have the 6 of Swords. So there's definitely movement away from something here. You could be leaving behind a difficult environment, a stressful chapter, a situation that has felt emotionally heavy, or even a mindset that has kept you stuck. And then we finish with the 10 of Pentacles, which tells me you're not moving away just for the sake of escaping. You're moving towards something more secure, something with longevity, something you can actually build a future around. For some of you, this could literally be a new job, a better financial situation, moving home, creating more stability for your family, or entering a chapter where you feel much more established. And I think the unexpected part is that you may not realize yet just how much this transition improves your long-term position. You might initially think you're simply leaving something behind, but when you look back, you could realize that this was the moment you started building a much more stable version of your life. So the development that changes things feels like this. You move away from something that has been draining or limiting you, and in doing so, you create the space for a level of independence and security you may not have believed was available to you before. So now we're going to look at what changes in your physical reality. Okay, so we have the Emperor, the Ace of Swords, and the Queen of Cups. This feels like a very real decision being made. The Emperor is structure, authority, boundaries, responsibility, and taking control of something. So I think for one of the biggest physical changes for you is that you stop allowing a situation to remain vague. You make a plan, you set a boundary, you commit to a direction. For some of you, this could absolutely show up through work or career, especially if you're stepping into more responsibility, becoming your own boss, taking leadership over something, or creating much more structure around a project you've been building. For others, this could involve your home, finances, family, or simply finally getting serious about a decision you've been putting off. And then we have the Ace of Swords. So there is clarity here, a conversation, a decision, new information, or a moment where you suddenly know exactly what needs to happen next. And I really like that the Queen of Cups is beside it, because I don't think you're making this decision purely from logic. You're also listening to yourself emotionally. Earlier in this pile, we saw that tension between desire and attachment, and we saw you being asked to stop pouring energy into things that aren't giving enough back. So I think by this point, you're becoming much better at asking what actually feels right for me. Not just what is practical, not just what makes sense to everybody else, not just what you're already interested in. The Emperor gives you the confidence to make the decision. The Ace of Swords gives you the clarity, and the Queen of Cups makes sure the decision is still emotionally aligned. So whatever changes physically, I think it comes from you becoming much more intentional about the life you're building. You're no longer just juggling everything and hoping it works itself out. You're starting to decide what stays, what goes, and what deserves a proper place in your future. Now we're going to look at what happens in love and relationships between the eclipses. Okay, so we have Strength, the Moon, and the Four of Wands. This feels like a situation where you may not have all of the answers immediately. The Moon can bring uncertainty, mixed emotions, things happening beneath the surface, or simply not knowing exactly where something is going yet. And considering everything we've already seen in this pile around attachment and wanting a specific outcome, I think this is really important. Because strength comes before the moon. So I don't think you're being asked to chase clarity. You're being asked to hold yourself steady while things reveal themselves naturally. For some of you, there could be feelings that haven't been fully expressed yet. There could be uncertainty around somebody's intentions, or you may simply be questioning whether a connection has the potential to become something more stable. But then we finish with the Four of Wands. And I really like that as the outcome of this little sequence, because the Four of Wands can bring stability, commitment, celebration, a relationship becoming more established, or simply feeling much more secure in where you stand with somebody. For those already in relationships, this could involve strengthening the foundation of the connection, spending more time together, making plans, reaching a point where something feels more settled. For those who are single, this could be a connection that initially feels uncertain or difficult to read, but gradually starts showing much more potential than you realized. And for some of you, the Four of Wands could also represent your home or family relationships becoming more important during this period. But I think the biggest message is not to let the moon pull you back into obsession over what you cannot currently know. Strength says you don't have to force an answer out of something before it's ready. Because if this is something stable, the Four of Wands suggests that stability will eventually become visible. So between these eclipses, I think love is asking you to practice a very different kind of strength. Being able to sit with uncertainty without abandoning yourself inside it. Now we're going to look at what is developing behind the scenes that you can't see yet. So we have the Four of Cups, the Five of Cups, and Temperance. This feels much quieter than some of the other developments we've seen in your pile. I think something is being emotionally recalibrated. So the Four of Cups can be disengagement, boredom, emotional withdrawal, or simply reaching a point where something that once had a strong hold on your attention doesn't affect you in quite the same way anymore. Then we have the Five of Cups, which tells me there's been disappointment here. Something didn't go the way you hoped. Something may have fallen short of your expectations. And I think for a while, part of you may have still been looking back at it, wondering what could have been different or whether you should have done something differently. But then we have Temperance. And Temperance is healing, it's integration, returning to balance. So what is developing behind the scenes may actually be your ability to make peace with something without needing it to be undone or fixed. And I think that's really important for this pile because we've had death twice, we've had the devil, and we've had the Six of Swords. There's been this repeated message of releasing an attachment and moving away from something that has already taken enough from you. Temperance tells me that process is already happening, even if it doesn't feel dramatic. You may suddenly realize one day that you haven't thought about something in the same way for a while, that you don't feel the same urgency, that you're no longer waiting for the same outcome, that the disappointment is still part of your story, but it isn't controlling the direction you're going anymore. And sometimes that is what real healing looks like. Not a huge moment, not waking up and suddenly feeling completely different, just gradually becoming less emotionally entangled with what happened. So behind the scenes, I think you're becoming much more balanced around something that once carried a lot of emotional weight. And that creates space for you to respond to what's coming next from a much calmer place. Now we're going to look at what reaches a turning point at the August 28th lunar eclipse. Okay, so 9 of Wands, Strength, and Knight of Cups. I think this is where some of your defenses finally start coming down. The 9 of Wands is that energy of having been through enough that you are naturally a little guarded. You've learned from experience, you're cautious, you don't necessarily trust something immediately just because it looks promising. And honestly, considering how much this pile has been about disappointment, attachment, and learning where your energy is actually being returned, that makes complete sense. But then Strength comes out again. And earlier in your relationship reading, Strength was asking you to sit with uncertainty without abandoning yourself inside it. Here I think it's showing that you're becoming much more secure in yourself. You're not strong because nothing affects you. You're strong because you no longer need fear to make every decision for you. And then we have the Knight of Cups. So there's movement towards something emotionally meaningful. For some of you, this absolutely could be an offer, an invitation, a romantic development, or somebody approaching you. But it could also be a creative opportunity, a dream you've wanted to pursue, or simply something that makes you feel excited about your life again. And I think the turning point is that you're finally willing to meet it. You're still discerning, you're still taking what you've learned with you, but you're not allowing your past disappointments to automatically convince you that everything new will end the same way. So around this lunar eclipse, I think you're moving from I need to protect myself from what might happen into I trust myself enough to see where this could go. And that feels like a really important shift for this pile. You don't have to become completely unguarded. You just have to stop making every new opportunity pay for what something old did to you. So now our final tarot question. I don't know why I feel so tired reading this pile. Maybe you guys are feeling really tired too. Where do you stand when eclipse season is over? Alright, we have the Sun, the Page of Wands, and the Five of Pentacles. Firstly, if you've watched another pile and the Sun has already come out for you, I would pay attention to that. The Sun has appeared elsewhere in this reading, so if you're being drawn to it repeatedly, there may be something here specifically around clarity, visibility, confidence, or something finally becoming much easier for you to see. Because the Sun is such a beautiful card to begin this final message with. There's warmth here, optimism, a sense of coming back to life a little bit. And after everything we've seen in this pile around death, the devil, disappointment, and releasing attachments, I think you come out of this eclipse season feeling much lighter. You understand yourself better. You understand what you want better. And then we have the Page of Wands. So there's something new that you're excited about. A new direction, an idea, an opportunity, a project, maybe even a completely different vision for what your life could look like. The Page of Wands doesn't necessarily know exactly where something is going yet, but he wants to find out, and I think that's where you are. You're curious again, you're willing to explore, you're willing to take a chance on something without needing to know exactly how the entire story ends. But then we finish with the Five of Pentacles, and I think this is really important because it tells me the old fears don't disappear overnight. You could still have moments where you question whether you have enough money, enough experience, enough support, enough confidence, enough of whatever you think you need before you're allowed to go after this new direction. And I think this is the final thing eclipse season leaves you working through. Because the Sun and the Page of Wands are saying there's something here, go and explore. But the Five of Pentacles can be the voice that immediately says, but what if I can't? So you may come out of eclipse season with a new path opening in front of you, but also with a much clearer awareness of the scarcity mindset or insecurity that has previously stopped you from taking chances. Pile 3, I actually think that's really powerful, because once you can see the fear, you don't have to automatically obey it. So pile 3, you don't leave eclipse season with every uncertainty magically gone. You leave with something better. You leave with a clearer sense of what excites you, what you're ready to move towards, and which old fears you're no longer willing to let make the decisions for you. Now we're going to move on to the oracle cards and look at what does your higher self want you to trust while this unfolds. Okay, pile 3, you have Lemurian Crystal, Motherline Healing, Cycle Breaker. This card talks about becoming aware of the healing and movement that is already happening for you. And its message is essentially that you may already be doing the work you think you still need to begin. You're living through it. You're changing the pattern. You are becoming the cycle breaker. And honestly, this makes so much sense with your reading. You started with the Six of Cups, which immediately brought the past into this pile. We've had death twice, we've had the Five of Cups, we've had temperance, we've had the devil. There's been this repeated theme of what you've inherited, what you've become attached to, and what you've continued simply because it's familiar, and then deciding whether it actually deserves to continue with you. And because this card specifically mentions the mother line, for some of you, this could relate quite literally to patterns within your family or maternal line. Maybe around relationships, money, security, self-worth, how much you're expected to give to other people, what success is supposed to look like, or even the way emotions have historically been dealt with in your family. But it doesn't have to mean you know exactly where the pattern originated. Sometimes being a cycle breaker simply means reaching a point where you say, this may have been normal for me, but I don't want it to remain normal. And I think that's what this eclipse season is doing for you. You're becoming much more conscious of what you want to carry forward and what ends with you. And I love that the card says to trust the movement that's already happening, because healing isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like responding differently, choosing differently, not chasing something you would once have chased, walking away from something you would once have tried to save, allowing yourself to want a different kind of life. So if you've been wondering whether you're actually making progress, I think this card is your confirmation that you are. You don't need to have completely transformed everything yet. You're already breaking the cycle every time you choose differently from the version of you who came before. And pile 3, I'm going to leave your reading there. I hope it resonated. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.